Hello, everybody. I am Quint Holguin, and today we're going to be learning about Mesoamerican culture and what their diet looked like and how that changed with the Columbian Exchange. Before we actually get into learning about the Mesoamerican diet, I would just like to propose a question to you. I want you to just think about what you've had for dinner in the past few days. Think about the food that you've eaten and where that may have come from, right? If you had a hot dog or a hamburger recently, that meat most likely came from livestock like a cow. And think about how connected our food system is, right? That cow had to grow up somewhere. It had to eat probably a wheat or grain or corn, most likely. And that crop had to be grown somewhere, right? When the cow was processed, it was probably shipped to a butcher somewhere, and then it was frozen, and then it was brought to your grocery store, right? So think about exactly how connected our food system is, and kind of ask yourself: do you think it was always like that, or do you think this is a rather new thing? Spoiler alert, I will tell you this is a more recent development in human history. If we go back a couple hundred years, for the most part, people knew what their diet consisted of pretty regularly. Now it's almost impossible to try to trace back exactly where your dinner came from. But before, people knew exactly what animal they were eating or even what that animal was eating. So it's kind of a difference that we've seen now. And we're going to explore more about like how that came to be and specifically how that came to be in Mesoamerica. Um, so one of the first examples of kind of the complexity of our food system on a mass scale was the Columbian Exchange in the 1400s. And we'll learn here that the Columbian Exchange was pretty much the transfer of biological goods between the New World and the Old World, that being America, the New World, and Europe, the Old World. And I should also include Africa in there. Basically, at this time, we saw so many people traveling back and forth in between the two regions that were pretty isolated before. That they, were sharing so many, technologies and biological goods. And when I say biological goods, I would like to point out a few things in particular. The big three are crops, livestock, and diseases. And you can see here that there are some, very popular foods on here, right? Corn came from the Americas. Things like pumpkins and squash did, chili peppers, and things that got transferred from Europe are more livestock animals like horses, cattle, chickens, right? I know for me, I like to think of Native Americans riding horses as like this long idea, passed down through generations. But horses were actually native to Europe, so that was a more recent development since the 1400s. Um, One of the big impacts of this was an expanded diet for many of the people. Specifically, a expanded diet for more of the wealthy people in Europe that were able to afford these new foods. Another impact that was brought about was diseases that killed millions of people. A lot of people are familiar with smallpox coming to the New World and killing a lot of Native Americans because they didn't have a immune system ready for it. But also diseases came to Europe from America. Namely, the big one was syphilis that got spread around Europe and Africa a lot. Um, Now, before moving on to the specific focus of today's lesson, i.e., how the Columbian Exchange affected Mesoamerican diets, we first need to acknowledge that sometimes our cultural norms are a little different than what we expect and what we've grown to expect. You might find certain norms uncomfortable or even awkward. However, it's important to understand this is a part of history and these people's history, and we need to respect that. Um, we need to figure out like exactly what caused these cultural differences, and knowing that helps us learn and appreciate and understand history and these people better. Um, so one of the biggest differences, or one of the most shocking ones, I will say, is in Mesoamerica pre the Columbian Exchange, guinea pigs were a major source of protein, specifically for the Incan Empire. Now, I know that's kind of shocking to some because guinea pigs are more of a household pet in America now, but it was one of the major sources of protein for these people and one of the few animals that they could domesticate at the time. All right, so before we actually get into the specific civilizations, I should name them and tell you a little bit about them. So you'll see here that I like to call these the big three of Mesoamerica: the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the Incan Empire. And you can see the Aztecs are kind of present day Mexico. Just below them is the Mayans, so they kind of share a similar region there. And then all the way down in present day Chile are the Incans. And we'll learn a little bit more about the topography of each region and how that impacted their food. Great. All right, so first off, we are going to talk about the Aztecs. They were one of the three major civilizations in Mesoamerica, and as you can see here, the capital of the Aztec Empire was the Tenochtitlan. This city was pretty marshy. It was kind of built upon a marshy area of I believe it's where present day Mexico City is, actually in the same region. But yeah, so it was kind of marshy and a lot of water. So they had to do these make special farms to grow their food called chinampas. And basically, these were specific farms that were floating on the water, and the roots of the plants would grow into the water and into the dirt of the kind of the marsh area. But the actual leaves and fruit or vegetable were still harvestable for the people, and they had to take boats in between them. You can see there in the picture what a one of these farms would have looked like. Another thing we should talk about are the different types of food. Maize or corn, beans, even chocolate was a part of the Aztec Empire. A lot of these foods you might find in your present day diet, but they were not in Europe at the time. These were strictly American foods. A little bit more about the social classes of the Aztec Empire. Obviously, like any social class, you have more of the wealthy people at the top of it, and they were able to have higher quality foods, while people at the bottom of the social class, like slaves, really just kind of subsisted off of basic grains and proteins, nothing fancy. Like they probably wouldn't have eaten chocolate very much. Great. Moving on to the Mayan Empire here. The Mayan Empire, they were kind of a little bit unique because they are on a little bit more hilly or mountainous side, which meant, their area for growing crops was a little bit more limited. So what they did was they came up with this clever system called the slash and burn technique. And basically what they would do is they would go into these hills, and they would, kind of slash down everything on the hill, and then they would burn areas there so that way they had, an area to actually grow crops on. But the problem was they were still hilly. So actually what they ended up doing was cutting almost stairways into these hills. And that gave them a flat surface to grow their crops on. You can see in the image there, that is present day where the Mayans were, and kind of how their stairs are still present on the landscape. This was called terrace farming, this kind of step or stairway farming that they did, and it was really unique to the Mayans. Another part about the Mayan food system was they didn't have one big city or capital. They had a lot of smaller states across the empire, so that encouraged trade between all of the different all of the different cities, which meant food got transferred around. If you had one region that was better at growing beans, for instance, they would grow their cash crop to say, and then move it across the Mayan Empire and sell it somewhere else. Similarly, with social classes, nobilities really had the higher foods, the more wealthy or expensive ones, while people like slaves or even the bottom of the middle class were more likely to eat the basic kind of breads and meats that you would find from animals and plants in the region. All right, moving on to the Incas here. They were a powerful civilization, kind of again in the present-day Chile. Again, very mountainous here. But the difference was their mountains were not so much hilly, but more rocky. So they had a hard time growing food. They did still have some food. Chili peppers, for example, was a common food here. They also grew beans and different types of herbal grasses that they could, put in a stew or eat up. But one of the key features of the Incan diet were guinea pigs. They were native to the region, and they were one of the few animals at the time that were domesticated in the Americas. You can see the bottom left there, that is a current day a guinea pig farm. There are still cultures in Chile and South America that still eat guinea pigs. It's very common to see them, kind of put on a skewer and roasted, and that's a common meal now. It's almost surprising for some in America because, like I said earlier, they are kind of household pets. But it was part of their diet. Other foods that they ate, beans, potatoes, and maize, right? Again, they really didn't have the growing space for all of them, but they still did incorporate them into their diet. A little bit about their topography. They had a capital called Cusco, where present-day Peru is. They had important cities. You probably heard of Machu Picchu. They also had many, many trade routes across the region. So similar to the Mayans, they also traded food a lot between these different areas, right? If I had a specific area where guinea pig fostering was very popular, right, I would raise and probably slaughter these guinea pigs and then trade them across one of the many routes the Incans had. Once again, similar social ladders where the wealthy ate more of the expensive foods, while the lower class was kind of subjected to the basic foods that would get you by on a day-to-day basis.